Do you remember the blue zones? 5 unique places on Earth where people live the longest, healthiest lives. Well, if you haven't heard, they've essentially been debunked, showing that pension fraud and poor record keeping are likely the true reasons it appears that these areas have high numbers of centenarians or people living over 100. But wait, that doesn't mean some of the findings aren't correct or valuable. So let's separate the wheat from the chaff and find out what blue zone findings can improve our overall well-being. Specifically, today, let's tier the 3 nutrition blue zone variables to find out which can help us live a life that fosters well-being. Quick backstory, if you're not interested, jump to the timestamp shown on your screen right now. In the fall of 2015, in my 3rd year of university, I was sitting on a hard bench in the dining hall with a buzz of socialization behind me. Incredible people from all over the world, sharing ideas, laughing, and connecting. But I was focused on holding my upper belly in to be like a seatbelt against my stomach, keeping it from jumping out my throat. I was waiting, hand on an empty gym bag, for 2 personal-sized pizzas. Once my order was called, I quickly hid them in my bag, tucked my chin, and headed up to my dorm to eat alone. I'd love to be able to pinpoint why this was happening. Maybe it was because I was the health and fitness guy, so I was scared to be seen eating 2 pizzas thinking I'd be judged. Maybe it was some social anxiety. I'm not really sure. But this went on basically for 2 years, eating almost every meal alone in my dorm. By 2017, I had gotten really into podcasts, and Rich Roll's podcast was like my own personal mentorship program. And he had Dan Buettner on as a guest. It was Buettner's 2nd time on the show, and he was talking about the findings of his exploration on happiness. And it made my brain want to just melt and escape out my ears because at that time I was so embarrassed about who I was and the things I did. I didn't know how to interact and have healthy relationships with other people or with my own experience with food or lifestyle. I was so enthralled by the conversation that I went back and listened to the first time he was on Rich's podcast, and that was all about the blue zones. I didn't really know how to set goals that actually mattered at that time of my life, but this felt like a framework that I could strive for. The 9 common lifestyle habits that they found in the blue zones. And this was where I would love to say everything changed. I was fantastic in my friendships and relationships and my relationship with food and lifestyle. But yeah, no, it was a lot of trial and error. A lot of being totally distracted from it and then coming back to it over time, basically throughout my 4th and 5th years at university. And what was often the thing that brought me back to it and refocused me towards making lifestyle changes to align with the blue zone findings was social meals. Some of my fondest and most vivid memories from that time was sharing a glass of wine or a meal with people I care about. My friends, Victor, Andre, Tina, Catherine, Kieran, Ben, and so many more. Fast forward almost a decade, and now these 9 variables are central tenets of my life. They've been the decision-making tools for what home we decided to purchase, what community to choose when a work opportunity came up last year, the meals we prepare, our priorities and mindset toward lifestyle, even how I'm approaching my new role as a parent. And I know some of the specifics aren't based on great science, and I've just let those go. It's not necessarily a shortcut to live to 100 or an exact model to replicate, but it is a nice framework for improved well-being if you aren't sure where to start. I don't know if I would be where I am today if I didn't use this framework and trial and error it throughout my 20s. I don't know if I would have outgrown some of those challenges I faced in my 20s. Eventually, I would love to talk about all 9 of the variables and see which ones are S tier top notch and which fail or barely pass as beneficial. But today, let's focus on the 3 nutrition variables with a little bonus one that isn't nutrition specific, but relates to it. The blue zone's power of 9 are the 9 lifestyle variables that these places that supposedly have higher, supposedly have higher numbers of centenarians all have in common. 4 categories, 9 variables. Today, we're focusing on the Eat Wisely category, which has 3 variables related to nutrition. Number 1 is the 80% rule, based on the Japanese concept harahachi bu, which roughly translates to mean something like eating until you're 80% full. Number 2, plant slant. What they found was that these centenarian groups largely ate mostly plant-based meals with meat on average 5 times per month, and that a primary food amongst all of the groups was beans. Number 3 is wine at 5. They found that the majority of these centenarians drink 1 to 2 glasses of alcohol per day, particularly wine, usually with friends and food. So let's get into it. The 80% rule is the mindfulness practice of stopping eating when you are about 80% full, based on the Japanese concept of harahachi bu and the centenarian community of Okinawa, Japan. On its own, this is a bit difficult to say whether or not this concept is practical or effective in varying contexts. Other things would likely have to be happening for you to have that level of awareness on a regular basis and to apply it. like being aware of your hunger signaling, not just when you're 80% full, but in general, what your hunger signals feel like, what your fullness signals feel like, the spectrum they exist on, and what might be hindering accurately noticing these signals, what cues or habits are overriding them. If we take this 80% rule to mean that, then I think there's something there. To just say eat till you're 80% full, I'd honestly give like a C or D because it's just not terribly helpful. But if we think of this as an ongoing process of practices to eat more mindfully, and that 80% fullness is the outcome, then this is a solid B tier. Not A or S, because it is a bit finicky. The reason I say that is because from a health and longevity outcome standpoint, the assumption is that 80% full will lead to a calorie intake that is associated with a body size, that is associated with health outcomes, and that may or may not be true. It depends what the person is eating, not just how much, as well as a lot of other things. And someone could also get there eating more satiating foods like fiber and protein and feel, say, 90% full, but have eaten fewer calories because of the food selection. So as a variable, it does make sense, but it isn't independently as important as some of the other practices or variables, so it's getting a B. Still good. But the food selection aspect leads us into number 2, plant slant. The idea with plant slant is that plant foods, and in particular beans, serve as a, quote, cornerstone of most centenarian diets, and that meat intake is low, around 5 servings per month. This variable fits in with 3 particular areas of research. Research on legumes specifically, which do suggest that legumes or bean consumption is associated with a reduced risk of all-cause and various cause-specific mortalities. On adherence to pro-vegetarian dietary patterns, which also has evidence to suggest reduces all-cause and cause-specific mortality. And on fiber intake, which again has evidence to suggest reduces the risk of all-cause and cause-specific mortalities. It's difficult to argue against a heavily plant-slanted diet and the outcomes we tend to see that come alongside it, whether it's an exclusive plant-based diet or one with modest amounts of meat or animal products. Plant slant gets a solid S tier. Getting more plant-based foods, whole grains, fruits and vegetables is probably single-handedly one of the best things you can do for your overall health and well-being in regards to nutrition. So what to drink with all that yummy plant-based food? Perhaps some wine? Or maybe not. This takes us to number 3, wine at 5. Now, I think the Blue Zone people make one critical error in how they present this variable. Here's what it says on their website. People in all Blue Zones except Adventists drink alcohol moderately and regularly. Moderate drinkers outlive non-drinkers. The trick is to drink 1 to 2 glasses per day, preferably Sardinian Cananuo wine with friends and or food. And no, you can't save up all week and have 14 drinks on Saturday. The critical error I think they make here is the moderate drinkers outlive non-drinkers. This simply isn't true. This meta-analysis and systematic review from 2023 has this to say about the topic. This systematic review and meta-analyses of 107 cohort studies involving more than 4.8 million participants found no significant reductions in risk of all-cause mortality for drinkers who drank less than 25 grams of ethanol per day, about 2 Canadian standard drinks compared with lifetime non-drinkers, after adjustment for key study characteristics such as median age and sex of study cohorts. There was a significantly increased risk of all-cause mortality among female drinkers who drank 25 or more grams per day and among male drinkers who drank 45 or more grams per day, meaning low-volume alcohol drinking was not associated with protection against death from all causes. Additionally, this paper found that both observational studies and Mendelian randomization studies suggest that even low intake is associated with cardiovascular risk, which has essentially caused the recent change in public health messaging, saying that there really is no healthy amount of alcohol. It's a non-linear association, and 1 to 2 glasses of wine per week is likely not going to cause a lot of harm, but it's not healthy. And is not going to be better than no alcohol. So this is more of a, these people are healthy despite wine at 5, not because of wine at 5. That one part of the statement, moderate drinkers outlive non-drinkers, may be the case in their little groups that they looked at, but in general, this is blatantly false. F tier. This doesn't mean you can't enjoy a glass of wine here and there and have good health, but it's most likely not making you live longer. I really like this post by the powerlifting dietitian, and in particular what he says in the description. Alcohol consumption is not a health-promoting activity, and for some people, 1 drink leads to binge drinking. However, if you drink occasionally and in moderation, the increase in risk for cardiovascular disease is very modest, as demonstrated by the data shown in slide 2, obtained from a Mendelian randomization study. We must always balance optimality with sustainability. If you're looking to optimize your health to the fullest and live as long as possible, you're probably better off rarely, if ever, drinking. I will say, it's cool to see all the non-alcoholic options that are now available that allow you to have the similar experience without actually consuming alcohol. Because, like I mentioned earlier, some of my fondest memories in my early adulthood were around wine with friends. So being able to have a special beverage to share amongst those you care about can be nice. But if long-term optimal health is the goal, opt for the non-alcoholic option. As a bonus, not included in the Eat Wisely category, but included in the Connect category, is Right Tribe. Right Tribe is this idea of social circles that support healthy behaviors, and I think this is an incredibly underrated variable to nutrition and well-being. There is a variety of research on how beneficial this can be in someone's healthy eating journey. Research suggests that having social support can help protect against emotionally induced overeating, that having household social support can help with the magnitude of dietary change, and that social support is associated with eating self-efficacy, which connects in with the practical suggestion I want to invite you to consider today. If you have a goal to eat a healthier dietary pattern, here's how this idea of Right Tribe can help. Step 1 is to find a goal buddy that also has this goal, either someone in your home or a friend that lives elsewhere. Step 2 is to pick a tangible, smaller goal that will contribute to this overarching goal. Something like cooking 3 meals from this healthy cookbook we'll both buy. Or both of you can watch my last video on meal planning and come up with a joint meal plan for your dinners, and the goal can be to follow that plan. Step 3 is to dedicate 30 minutes or more to dinner time meals where you will sit and eat with this goal buddy. If it's someone not in your home, you might need your phone so you can eat together on FaceTime. It sounds weird, but it's really not that bad. Pro tip is cook the same meal so you're eating the same thing while FaceTiming. But if it is someone in your home, leave the phones somewhere else before coming to the table. And step 4 is once in a while, revisit the goal with that person to see how it's going. Maybe once a week at the end of your Thursday meal together, you can have a quick, hey, how's this going? And support one another through any challenges. This then adds another layer of benefit to this idea by making it goal-bound and a socially supported goal, which research highlights can be more effective, particularly for healthy habits. And social eating with others can increase social bonds, reduce the risk of poor dietary habits associated with social isolation, and has been shown to lower the probability of various depressive, anxiety, and stress-related symptoms. So eating with others also contributes to well-being in a variety of ways. It is interesting to note that people tend to eat more when they're eating with others, but also that people tend to eat what others are eating. So if you're both eating health-promoting foods, you might just eat more health-promoting foods when eating with a friend or loved one. Altogether, making this eating with your right tribe a super solid S-tier level habit. I know I expanded off the Blue Zone variables a bit and didn't take them explicitly as they present them, but I think that's the point with these Blue Zone findings. They're not to be exactly replicated. They're general principles to apply to your context in a way that's sustainable and contributes to your overall well-being. If you're interested in the rest of the 9 variables and how they stack up against the research, let me know, and I'm keen to do more of these exploring the other categories and variables of the Blue Zones. If you want to learn more about the Blue Zones, I recommend listening to those 2 podcasts with Dan Buettner on Rich Roll's podcast. To this day, they're still some of my favorites, and I return to them every once in a while. Dan's been on Rich's show a couple more times since then, so there's a few more episodes kind of within the same theme. In summary today, we looked at the 3 Blue Zone variables in the Eat Wisely category. At eating until you're 80% full, Harahachi Bu, and that if it's part of a mindful eating practice, it can be a great way to get to know yourself better and enhance your relationship with food and your body. B tier level variable. In the future, we'll talk more about how to take this concept up to an A tier with a few tweaks. Then we looked at plant slant and how eating beans, a dietary pattern heavy in plant foods, and high in fiber is a great way to reduce our risk of all-cause and cause-specific mortalities. S-tier variable and something we can all strive for. Lastly, we looked at wine at 5. And although we could tease it apart and highlight how this was a social thing with very minimal to moderate drinking and how that can be a positive experience, it flunks by saying drinkers outlive non-drinkers. Simply not true. Thank you so much for listening. My name is Jesse Bourgeois. If you have been enjoying the videos and want to help me out, please do hit the little thumbs up and subscribe. As a small channel just getting going, every watch, every subscriber, every like, and every comment makes a huge difference. So thank you to everyone who does that. Also, I would love to connect to you on Instagram. The link to my profile is in the description and my handle is here on the screen. Thanks for listening. Talk with you next time.